Okay, so Beatles. And among the people who watched the Beatles were a lot of future musicians. Here's Nancy Wilson from the group of Heart. If you don't know them, you probably don't. You might want to Google them. You can see these two sisters, Ann and Nancy Wilson, formed a rock group called Heart. She's had some big hit songs. And first time they saw the Beatles in the Ed Sullivan Show, that was the moment they heard the call to form a group, become rock musicians. They were 7 or 8 at the time. And this is the case with lots and lots and lots of musicians that formed huge popular bands through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show and said, wow, that's what I want to do. I got a tennis racket and went to my friend Georgie Robinson's house, and we strummed our tennis rackets in his basement listening to Beatles music, pretending to be playing guitars. All right, shifting gears back into something very serious, having a great impact on the nation. The TV cameras witness certainly made a big difference in the history of our country. On the day John Lewis and others led marchers over the bridge to Selma, Alabama, as part of a voting rights protest. News cameras were there, and they caught the abuse. This is, I believe, that is John Lewis kneeling on the ground with his hand on his head. He actually was beaten by a policeman. They sicked dogs on the protesters. They beat them. There were policemen on horses, on horseback. I don't know if it was also on this day, but they used high-powered hoses. This was the Selma police response to a peaceful march protesting on behalf of voting rights. In the South at that time, in many southern states, there were, frankly, ridiculous restrictions placed on black people wanting to vote. They'd have to answer a bunch of questions which no one else was asked about, U.S. history or just ridiculous things. Just in a nutshell, many southern states did not want their black citizens to vote. Now, does that sound just a tad bit familiar with some things we seem to be seeing today, state by state in certain states, where local state legislatures are passing laws attempting to restrict voting. And those restrictions seem to be, in some cases, aimed towards restricting certain sorts of people from voting. And so this battle continues. But back to this day, the fact that these brutal protests were shown on the nightly news that night and horrified Americans in their homes led to the passing of major civil rights legislation and voting rights legislation right afterwards. So let's stop and look at this videotape. This is actually John Lewis himself, a congressman who passed away recently. He was a civil rights warrior, narrating the video that you'll see from the Selma March.